I'm ready when you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome. Hello. Welcome to the Sustainability and Digital Print webinar from EcoPrint and Highcon. My name's Karis Kopp, and here is Marcus Timson, co-founder of EcoPrint and FuturePrint. Hi, Marcus.
Hello, Karis, and hello, everyone. Delighted to have you join us for our first EcoPrint webinar with Highcon.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Simon Lewis, Vice President of Marketing from Highcon. Hi, Simon.
Hello, Karis. Hello there, everybody.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for everybody watching live. There will also be a recording, so it will be available for download for those that can't join us, or for those of you here that love it so much that you want to watch it again, you can download it as well. And there is a function for questions, a Q&A section. If we have the time and we have an opportunity to add that to the discussion, then we will do so. Please do put any questions there. I think maybe we'll start by talking a little bit about why we're doing this webinar. We did a survey from EcoPrint in partnership with Highcon. So that's, we thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk about some of those results, really interesting results and insight into, sentiment around sustainability for a lot of businesses. So Marcus, maybe you could just talk a little bit about the survey and why we're here today.
Yeah, and with FuturePrint and with now EcoPrint, we often do surveys to gauge the kind of mood, attitude and development stages of the industries, whether it's through technology or whether it's through opinion on trends. And we've never done one on sustainability. And in Geneva last year, our leaders summit, clearly sustainability was top of the agenda. And Simon actually delivered a really good speech or presentation or talk, whatever you want to call it, at Geneva around sustainability, one penny at a time. And he and I got talking, and at that time we hadn't launched EcoPrint, but we felt it would be a good idea to partner with a survey to start having a dialogue and so on around the issue of sustainability within printing. So we launched this survey, worked together on the questions, and we have around exactly 125 respondents from around 26, 27 countries across the world. So clearly it's not a regional issue, it's a global issue. I mean, that's an obvious thing to say, but actually our community has reached, Asia, Australasia, America, and obviously Europe and South America. So it is truly global, and this gives us an opportunity to talk around some of the issues, and hopefully that we recognize it's a journey for us. Well, we by no means consider ourselves experts. I think you used the word, Simon, student of sustainability. I think that's really nice. Right. Yep, continually learning. And this is an opportunity to give back to the industry some insight. And obviously it aligns very nicely with EcoPrint, which will run in the middle of this year in Geneva. And out of this insight, we get to shape some of the dialogue at that event as well. So there's lots of reasons for doing it. It's just happy we got here and able to share this with people in this webinar. So
yeah,
really,
absolutely. I keep saying next year, about 2023 as well. I don't know when that starts. Maybe around March. Yeah, and everyone who has registered will be emailed a copy of that report as well. So you'll have that to take a look at after the webinar as well. So maybe if we jump straight into one of the kind of talking points that seems like a good topic to discuss based on the responses that we've got from the webinar, and that is around sustainability strategies. And is a sustainability strategy a nice to have or a must in 2023? So, perhaps when the conversation wasn't as advanced as it is now, it may have been viewed as a nice to have, but, are we in must territory now in 2023? Be possibly detrimental to businesses not to have that strategy. Simon, I think I'll go to you to weigh in on that, on your thoughts, and maybe a little bit around what the research might have thrown up as well.
Sure, thank you, Karis. So, it's just too easy to answer yes or no to a question like that, especially since the answer is obviously yes. Sorry, I have no opinion, but yes, the answer is yes. But actually, what I'd like to do before really discussing it is introduce this point and say, sustainability is truly a must for every business, but it hits different businesses in different ways. As I'm concerned, the packaging converting business is perhaps the one that is most in the sights of the regulators, because there's lots of packaging and there's lots of controversy, and packaging is plastic and fills the oceans, and there's a lot of confusion. And what I'd actually like to do is, when we look at this survey, the respondents came across the whole ecosystem. FuturePrint, EcoPrint has a lot of members who come from the manufacturer, the vendor side of the industry, the people who supply technology to the converters and the PSPs. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, as one of those players myself, our primary responsibility is to support our customers as they become more sustainable. So we have to have the answers for them, we have to have the information for them around what we're supplying, because that's actually what they're going to need to know, and how each of us in our own ways can help them become more sustainable. So I'd like to kind of hold much of this conversation around the converter or PSP viewpoint, because it covers everybody. And having said that, yes, I say it's a must, but let's look at these answers, because the results and the number of questions from the survey, because they bring what I consider to be a very interesting perspective. Mm. And the first question we're going to share with you here is going to be this question of, what is the most important challenge for your business? And sustainability is up there. People give multiple answers, and fundamentally, roughly the same number of people answer sustainability, supply chain, and rising energy costs. These are kind of the things that bother them. It's 51, 57, and 54%. So I call it roughly the same. Mm. But what makes it really interesting is by looking at question 4. Because in question 4, we asked, what's the most compelling opportunities for your business? And sustainability comes in as number 2. Number 2 is 54%. So it is a challenge and an opportunity. Now, those of us who have taught to think positively are always told to look at problems and challenges as an opportunity. The question is this really an opportunity? Because when I look at it, I say diversification is a completely different kind of opportunity to sustainability. Diversification is a true opportunity. Sustainability is probably more of a challenge that I want to call an opportunity or not. And for that, I would look also at the next question. Because in the next question, we ask how important sustainability is. And sustainability is clearly very important in people's words, but does it match their actions? And that's where we get to how important it is to your customer, which is the last question I wanted to touch right now. How important is sustainability to your customers? And the answer is, it's growing in importance, but it's, as it were, a lot less important to them than perhaps you might have thought, given the answers we've looked at so far. So what I would say is this, it's very important to my business. Yes, it's strategically important and it's strategically integrated in primary importance, 50% said, but sustainability is, sorry, I'm at the wrong, it's not fully integrated. So I would say, when we look at the answers and relate them to what I call the overall requirement, which is, yes, it needs to be a must in 2023. I'm not sure that the history is there yet. And we'll see as we go through our conversation that you don't have to have answers yet to what it means. But if you don't have a definition that it is indeed a must to have a sustainability strategy, then you don't even start asking the right questions. If it must be a sustainability strategy, then you ask, what does that mean for me? What do I need to measure? What do I need to do? What matters? What doesn't matter? But if I don't need to have a sustainability strategy, just a nice to have, then I wonder where it leaves you, and we'll come back to it in a minute. But that would be my initial answer to the question, and some interesting insights from those first 4 questions that we reviewed.
Yeah, I think really interesting insights. I think, you know, that 50% that do think it's strategically important or growing important, that, you know, does mean 50% perhaps not where you know they could be in terms of looking at sustainability. And I thought that was interesting what you were saying on opportunity, perhaps looking at it as an opportunity and a responsibility is perhaps what needs to be added to that, rather than just an opportunity. Marcus, any comments there on those first few slides, on the must-have or nice-to-have issue?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in one word, yes. But yeah, there you go, very efficient. No, but I think I can only really relay it to the experience I've had with sustainability within the print industry. And I rewind 10 years from around EcoPrint back then in 2012, that there was a sense to which people had products and were trying to create a story from the product they had, but the product they had wasn't designed particularly for sustainability. So it was like trying to shoehorn a sustainable story into an existing product, which I guess we can arguably all do. So I do think there's a much more serious intent in terms of design, and much more of a strategic impetus behind that, that's coming from C-level, that's coming from R&D departments. That's you know, I spoke to a printer this week that has an engineer that engineers things with materials independent from a manufacturer, which is showing a real commitment. And I think 10 years ago, we hadn't come into contact with then. People were playing with sustainability 10 years ago. It's much more serious now. Also, in the space of 10 years, logically, we've all got 10 years older. I've got balder, I've got fatter, and I've also got a beard. But not only that, the leadership group within the industries, the influencers, the people that are actually coming into more strategic roles, have a different mindset. And are not necessarily waiting for regulators to tell them what to do. They actually want to do the right thing. And while this isn't necessarily visible in terms of the speed to which they're leading their businesses and becoming sustainable beacons of inspiration, it's a fundamental shift. The discussions I've had with print service providers who are committed to sustainability aren't telling me they've got a sustainable product line and that's it, or a specific product. Their business is strategically invested in sustainability. So that's different as well. And I agree, it's rightly seen as a challenge and perhaps an opportunity. What's perhaps surprising is 10 years ago, it was definitely seen as a sales opportunity. But I'm not sure.
And it still is, as we'll see in a moment, Marcus.
Sorry?
Still is, as we'll see in a moment.
I won't spoil it, don't worry. But I think it's a business opportunity, and it's whether this is brand and or operational efficiency, it's really about preparing the business properly for the future. It's kind of future proofing, really. I mean, it's as simple as that. There's lots of challenges attached to doing that and making it more sustainable. But that's my slightly longer answer to just saying yes. So that's where I see it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's certainly interesting to look at that opportunity, to look at what's changed in those 10 years. I think that's an interesting thing about EcoPrint, what you're doing now, that you did first launch that event 10 years ago, and to kind of look at what's changed in that time. That takes us now on to our next talking point around the next few questions in the survey. And it's just about, why must companies have sustainability strategies? You know, why is it so key? Perhaps the survey, suggests that people could be more prepared. As we've said, they're looking at sustainability in more business terms than kind of business and that responsibility as well. So Simon, I'll go to you again first on that to kind of talk us through what you think about the importance of sustainability strategies and what we might have seen of people's views on that from the survey.
Okay, thank you, Karis. So I'll build on what Marcus just said. We've all evolved in this domain, and fortunately, we've all got a much better understanding today of the nature of the problem. And to me, the amazing thing is, although it is a giant problem that is kind of almost too big for any of us to get our minds around, today we understand that it is a problem that isn't easily solved, but where everybody can make a difference. And therefore, if we understand that it's not just inevitable that the planet is going to frazzle under global warming, but in fact, we can slow, stop, and then reverse the change. We have to see it, therefore, that the storm is coming, and those who aren't prepared will get severely hurt in the storm. The storm is what I'm going to call the brutal force of regulation, because at some point, all the talking, global summits in Glasgow and Sharm el-Sheikh and wherever it is, turn into dramatic decisions, force people's hands. And therefore, why must customers have a sustainability strategy? Because the storm is coming. But let's see more specifically. We asked our people, what trends and forces are in your view placing sustainability further up the agenda? And we can see the answers here. And first of all, it's a bit of everything. The 5 answers here all get between 40 and 60% response rates overall. But the respondents are seeing their customers and their customers' customers changing what they're looking for. They're seeing how legislation is changing and driving them to look differently. They're seeing technology, and they're understanding. I was very pleased to see this 61% increasing awareness and acceptance of the negative impact of climate change. People understand that it's not just articles in newspapers, it's the real world that each and every one of us lives in. And we can't just sit back and say, don't know what to do. To me, that's why people need to have a strategy. And therefore, when we ask them, what factors below would motivate you to be more sustainable with your business? The answer, the biggest answer, with only 56%, but still 56%, is because being sustainable is the right thing to do. Absolutely. You first and foremost have to do it because it's right. It'll be legally right in the future. It's right. But they don't want to be judged as not being environmentally responsible, 34%. But note, there's still 55% of people out there who think that being sustainable differentiates my business and will help me gain new customers. My view, guys, this is so 20 teens and not 2020. It can't be that for 55%, it'll actually differentiate their business, because if everybody sees this is what they need to do, it's not a differentiator, it's table stakes. Whether it's legally required table stakes, like falling foul of legislation, etc., or whether it's just because my competitors are doing it as well, I don't think it'll actually differentiate. That's my view, and I'm being provocative, I know that. But as far as I'm concerned, people need to have a sustainability strategy, not because it'll differentiate, but if anything, because the absence of sustainability strategy will adversely differentiate them. And the final question we wanted to bring here is, to what extent are net zero targets and regulatory changes influencing strategy? And the answer for 31% is that it's a key driver. But for 54%, it's important but not central. Seems to me to be just a little bit understating the challenge. And when 9% say it's important, but we're already compliant, that to me sounds like people who don't understand where they're living. And for the 6% who are not, for whom it's not important, guys, with respect, I think you're missing the boat. This is not something we can say is not important, and it's not something we can believe we've all done everything we can. There may be one or two people out there, but most responsible, serious businesses that I know of have long-term roadmaps to get there, to achieve what they want to. There's nothing that can be done overnight. So that's my take on why companies must have sustainability strategies, and some interesting insights from the survey. And really, I found them very interesting. Some of them encouraging, and some of them a little bit discouraging.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think it's, and I think it's something we will come on to in a later talking point as well. But you see some of these points that people have made in the survey that are quite encouraging, but also you look at that they expect to be, in a certain place in however many years' time, as we'll come on to, and you think the other questions suggest that perhaps people are, as you say, not doing what they can if they do want to get to where they're going, and those that aren't doing anything are definitely not going to be where they need to be if they are setting targets and are setting goals. And I think it's, as Marcus, you said, there's people are coming into businesses since the first launch of EcoPrint that are perhaps, I don't want to put it all on young people, but younger people do tend to be more engaged with the topic. And it's also, if you look at, things aren't going backwards, that sentiment is not going to go backwards. People are going to be more engaged with it, and that's people who are younger and obviously getting older and becoming more more useful to brands, more customers of brands. So if consumers are putting the pressure on the brands, and they're putting pressure on the businesses that they work with, it obviously from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense to thinking of it as not important, or to kind of almost rest on your laurels on that as well. So, I think, really interesting that point that 56% on what factor would motivate you to be more sustainable with your business, 56% because it's the right thing to do, and then 55% because it thinks that will help them gain new customer. Really, really interesting insight that. Marcus, on the topic of why companies need sustainability strategies and kind of, your thoughts and looking at the data as well, what do you think?
Yeah, like Simon hinted down, I think all the way through this survey, there's encouraging and discouraging. And encouraging, obviously, is the fact that people recognise climate change. And 10 years ago, I don't think they would. But then let's be honest, the climate's got a hell of a lot worse in 10 years. So you can't help but notice it, right? I mean, we had a record summer here in Northern Europe. It was uncomfortably warm. And then elsewhere in the world, there's really adverse weather conditions. There's no doubt that the climate has changed and will continue to get worse. So that was really encouraging to see. 10 years ago, I think we'd still be debating that, even though there's a bloody mountain range of evidence since the 1970s that climate's changing. I also think that what we think of net zero, whether we think it's a marketing statement or a positive thing that enables people to navigate towards a certain level, brands and retailers certainly are trumpeting that as a really good positive message to be putting out into their customer bases and to the world of consumers. So I guess this allied to environment gives two strong forces for change. And this coalescence really underlines the fact that consumer attitudes are finally changing. And this will be shaping the future. Personally, I wonder whether the benefit of a global audience participating in this survey perhaps gives a varied view on progress and a varied view on what's pushing change, but equally, different countries, different legislation, different cultures and so on. But still, people say that being more sustainable is the right thing to do, but a more important response is that people are still seeing it as a way to differentiate. As Simon said, I find that's interesting. Maybe in some courses, and let's not, let's be honest. If you're a large brand with resources, with a lot of money, with a sustainability lead, if you're a small printing business and you want to try and get your head around sustainability, if your business is fairly micro and you've got a customer base that's fairly local, then that may well be a differentiator. So I guess there's a bit of a polarization in terms of people's situation, both geographically and what businesses they may inhabit. So it's surprising it's still a differentiator, but still, that's what the results say. I guess what we're talking about with sustainability is basically change. We talk about climate change. That's changing. We can't control that. Change tends to occur, I think, wholesale by force. So we have to change because that's the law and we get penalized if we don't. Or actually, if it is actually more convenient to change. And that may be because we're losing money through people not wanting to buy from us because we haven't got the requisite products or approach. So I guess it's because of losing or a fear of loss. And I think that's just human nature. Yeah, there are very few. If you look at Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, that principle you can apply to sustainability. We've got more and more leaders now who are, amazingly, compared with other parts of the industry that I've worked in, are very, very secret. The people I'm talking to want to share this information, right? So in order for a mainstream to become, to adopt new things, these people need to see success happening elsewhere to minimize the risk of not changing, because they don't want to make a mistake. They don't want to invest in something if it doesn't have a market. So I think that's encouraging. That's positive, and much more so. This push-pull is strengthening, but for many I sense there's still not enough evidence, still not enough clarity. I think it's a confusing topic area, not enough help. Don't think there's enough collaboration, and we'll come to talk about that a little later. But yeah, that's kind of my view on things. EcoPrints, obviously, as an event, has a purpose to try to cut through all of that and enable that conversation to be a conduit of positive change. So yeah, that's kind of what I think. There's more there, but I kind of feel like I've talked enough there. Okay.
Well, I think it's a good lead on to the next point as well. But yeah, I think you're right there, but it's kind of change and mindset as well. I think for those that perhaps it is still a differentiator in your niche area or whatever, the day will come when it's not, as it has for what we're talking about here. So that mindset of changing for because it's responsible and that kind of thing, I think is important as well. But yeah, right, it could still be a differentiator for some businesses. But I think let's perhaps stay on that topic of having a sustainability strategy, but look at it more from a solutions point of view. And look at what companies have to do. What must every company be doing with respect to sustainability? I think you touched, Mark, there on confusing. It can be a confusing topic. Perhaps from the survey, it seems like it could be more central to people's strategies on the sustainability side. Simon, did you feel that from the survey, that perhaps there's not enough, big changes aren't being driven, and perhaps people need to look more at that?
Indeed. If the storm is coming, what do people do to get ready for it? And to me, first and foremost, they need to identify their specific threats and opportunities in their business. When I say opportunities, I don't mean necessarily an opportunity for business. I mean an opportunity to improve their sustainability performance and build plans around those. You need quantifiable targets. You need to be specific. You can't just talk in highfalutin tones about wanting to get. And I was troubled by some of the results. If we look at question 9, we asked, what would you consider the main barriers and challenges to improve production and industry performance towards net zero? And I look at the results here, and there's a whole series of answers. People could answer more than one. A lot of people obviously did, but they're blaming rather than acting. There's a lack of industry regulation. Let me bring up question 9, Marcus. Thank you. It's a lack of industry legislation and enforcement. There's a lack of industry unity. There's cultural resistance to change. There's the rising cost of energy. To me, the rising cost of energy is a good reason, because energy is one of the big sustainability problems, especially if you're not using green energy. Lack of understanding. I don't understand. That's not a barrier. That means it's a simple thing. Of all the things to do, figuring out what I need to understand is one of the easier things. Actually, taking the action is harder. I'll speak for myself. I joined Highcon 2 years ago, and when I joined the company, I knew nothing about sustainability here. And I just knew that we didn't do a good job telling a sustainability story. And I became, as you quoted earlier, Karis, a student of sustainability. We brought in somebody to help us, who worked every day for 3 months on sustainability to help us understand the conversation, the drivers, what we needed to look at. But every business needs to move beyond the lack of understanding and beyond finger pointing into concrete action. So we ask people, in recent times, have you changed your strategy for sustainability? And when I looked at the answers there, we designed more sustainable products. We've made a commitment to improving. We're taking small steps. We're seeking ways. It all sounds to be very, I'll be provocative. It's tweaking rather than driving big changes. The design more sustainable products with 39% respondents. Actually, that's really important, but it's still a bit back to the thing that you can most easily point to rather than dealing with the problems at the root. So I see that as a challenge. We then asked in question 12, what's preventing you from becoming more sustainable? Because honestly, I don't pretend that it's easy. I sit here saying, you guys, you need to do things, you need to understand, you need a strategy. I also said it's a journey. It's not a wave of magic wand and you solve the problem. What's preventing you? Number one answer, the head and shoulders above the other, 46% the cost of doing so. And yet half of that number don't have enough information. 31% don't see enough demand for sustainable products. What, it's just about sustainable products? What about working with sustainable businesses? They don't have the infrastructure and the time is reasonable. Again, lack of government direction. They want to be treated like sheep, not like leaders. So to me, that's kind of an interesting view. And what I'll say is that you can answer more than one. On this question, there's a 190% response rate. In other words, of the 125 people, they give roughly 200 answers. When we asked them the next question that we have here, which was what you consider to be the main barriers and challenges to improve production as they go towards net zero, we got a 280% response rate. So almost, we had another 100 answers on this. And they talk about the things we looked at before, but to me, it's very clear. They're much better at pointing fingers as to and blame rather than acting. And again, I'll be provocative. They're blaming the situation more than their own individual challenges. If a sales organization just says, oh, I'm not selling, what's the first thing you do? You say, get out in front of the customers. Don't just sit there complaining. And I don't feel that there's this kind of drive for engagement. In question 13, we said, what production and process steps have you taken to improve your sustainability performance? 70% are sourcing sustainable materials, which is really good. But in many cases, that's not dealing with what I'm going to call the overall sustainability of a business is going to where they are. And I bet that half of these guys are thinking of something like FSC, which is nothing about sustainability. It's simply about about managing the forestry. So we need to be sure they're doing the right things. I see these answers as kind of limited at the edges. And the final question we have here is, what do you think is the best method for measuring and increasing sustainability performance? Really important, because if you don't know how you're going to measure yourself, you don't know how to judge if you're making progress. And I was actually quite encouraged by this, because the first three answers here, meeting emission standards and targets, measuring our carbon output and footprint, and measuring our production processes, and understanding the environmental footprint, add up to 57%. So over half answered quantifiable things. The problem is that 43% said having a strategic vision and commitment, or by providing sustainable products that brands want. Having sustainable products is not having a way of or actually measuring your performance. So I think it needs to be measured, meeting numbers, setting numbers, tracking numbers, because the devil is in the details. It's frightening, it's difficult. I don't say that you say this and tomorrow you have the numbers, but if you say this today, in your business, you might have it in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, in a gradual process. But if you don't have this, you're just making nice words, not more. Again, provocative, but that's my take on this. And I think it's really important that people step up to the plate and actually move beyond nice words to the difficult things and the recognition, again, that it's a journey. I'm sorry, I probably spoke too long on that.
No, not at all. No, I think that's really well said, because I think it's important to reiterate that it is hard. You know, I don't think that the point of this is to preach, like you said, that people are not doing enough and saying, you know, why aren't you doing more? It is that, but it's also acknowledging that it's difficult to do. And I think one of the hardest parts would be to scrutinize what you're doing, like you say, and look at process. But as you've said, Simon, that's where you make the most impact. Looking at your process, it would be the same if you wanted to have more efficient production. You'd start at the beginning, you'd look at everything you're doing and look at your end-to-end process. And I think that's key for sustainability as well. To think cynically, you know, perhaps just it's more of a PR, more of a marketing win. Easy to say, oh, we do the sustainable product now, and that's available, which is really important, but it is it's much more difficult, I think, to look at the process. But I think it'll be a lot more difficult if you're not doing that and you kind of leave it down the line to implement some kind of sustainability strategy there. Marcus, I think it was really interesting what we were looking at from the survey on people's thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sort of picking on a couple of things Simon said. So, lack of industry legislation, standards and reinforcement. That's obviously, as I was saying earlier, the force thing. That's clearly a strong motivation when you just have to do it. But it demonstrates a massive lack of leadership, doesn't it? You know, why are you waiting to be told? And who are you waiting to be told by? I mean, sitting in the UK, we've got the worst leadership group in living memory. I wouldn't take, you know, what they told me as anything worth listening to. Frankly, don't necessarily think that's the case around the world, but in Germany, they're opening coal mines again. So, you know, of course, that's to do with the energy crisis, but still, that's a governmental decision. We can take back some control, can't we? And that is a mindset change. And that's about thinking of sustainability really as a future investment, an investment you can reap the rewards of in the future. And also measurement has to be critical there, because if you don't know where you're starting, you're not really going, you don't necessarily need a net zero target, but you should be improving each year and putting in place a journey chart and go for it, because there's nothing that comes across more genuinely and better is if you've got that in place, and also that sense to which, you know, if you've got a couple of sustainable products, that's positive. Well, I imagine it's better than not having, but let's be honest, I think in 5 years' time, and it's not that long away, the top businesses won't have a toxic product alternative that's cheaper. It'll all be sustainable. So get going on it now, because you're going to learn a lot in the process. And while it may not yield results initially, it will do. And particularly because the whole world's moving in that direction. But I wouldn't wait for legislation. However, trumpeting EcoPrint, we will be having roundtables at the event. We will be trying to unite the disparate associations of the printing world, and also, frankly, the disparate printing organisations, and that actually, for us, for 2 days, put your competitiveness away and let's collaborate, because actually we can all learn from one another. From my perspective, that's the most powerful way to effect change, is to be inspired by somebody you relate to that's made progress with something that's truly compelling and also sustainable. So yeah, that's my take on that, really.
And you're absolutely right. And I encourage everyone who's listening, and this isn't my event, it's Marcus, but the more we can get to this event in Geneva in June, the more sharing, the more cross-pollination, mutual inspiration, and commitment we can generate to this really important imperative.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and well, it's ecoprint.events, little plug there for the website to find out more on that. And I think this again leads on nicely. It's almost like we planned the talking points ahead of time. That point of regulation, should people just wait for the regulator and follow the regulator's lead? I think, Simon, what you said interestingly before about, people want to be led. I think you used the word sheep, I believe, on that. But I think, the question of regulation is a really important one. Is it the responsibility of businesses? Do they have time even to be kind of sitting on their hands and waiting for regulation to come in? What do you think about that?
Okay, so here, very clear to me. It's difficult to know exactly what the regulators are going to, except we do know that the EU is really active in this field and leading the world. And like in so many areas, they're probably setting standards, but directionally where they're going. I'm going to quote 2 different stories. The first is, I had a colleague in Cytex 90s, had this big sign over his desk: the sooner you fall behind, the longer you have to catch up. And I'll say the analogy to this is, if you wait till all the instructions are clear, the time you have to comply is going to be really short. Given that we know where it's going rough directionally, don't wait till you know the exact final point. Start on the journey now, because it's easier to have longer. The second is that my grandson was recently diagnosed as being celiac. And his mother asked in the hospital where he was diagnosed about whether he could have something to eat, or a specific thing. I don't even remember what it was. And this doctor looked at her and said, if it said on a package, this product contains poison, would you give it to your child? For your child, gluten is poison. For everybody, excess CO2 damaging the world for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. So don't wait to be told what to do. Go out and start treating it like poison, and you have to do something. The question that we ask people, it's fine to move directionally, is rather than waiting for clarity and then fine-tuning as you go along. We asked the question about the regulators. We said, what do you feel would help your business prioritize sustainability further? And people are looking for increased legislation and regulations and funding from government or other sources. That's all well and good. Together, that's 85% response rate. Out of 85% responded that. People want inspiration for what others have done. They don't want to be leaders, they want to be followers. And the largest numbers say we want a better understanding how to be both profitable and planet friendly, as though there is an inherent contradiction unless somebody can show them otherwise. I would say it's fine to understand, it's fine to look to others for inspiration. It's fine to say we'd love some government direction or even some subsidies. But you know what? To me, it's a little bit passive in the face of such a large challenge. We're facing an existential threat. Take some risk, take some actions, and don't just, be Nero fiddling while Rome burned.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, some of the thoughts there on legislation. I think, it's perhaps, if we're waiting around for what should be being done, we will be maybe waiting around for a long time on that one. Marcus, what were your thoughts on, first of all, whether should people just be waiting for regulation, and what you kind of felt from those responses as well?
Yeah, I just feel that it's a sales challenge as much as anything else, and a communication challenge. Simon used the word passive, and I think that's right. And I think that's something that passivity has permeated most of the print industry in the world. And I think it is hugely innovative, and there are lots of examples of fantastic businesses that are really pushing things forward. But the majority are quite passive and do not sell, and they'll take orders, they'll wait to see what happens, they'll follow. They're sheep, but we're still lemmings. Let's be honest. It's about, like I said earlier, taking back some control and going for it, and actually risking a bit, but committing to learning. It's an adaptability skill that humans have. We all have it. We can actually adapt, renew, all of these things. So the things we knew yesterday are born from, or today, are born out of the 1950s, the post-industrial model, how we used to sell, how we used to do business, and everything else. That still seems to dominate in the print industry. We actually need to recognize things have changed, create ideas and products that provide value, and go out and sell them, and be really much more proactive about it, and also ally that to your sustainability strategy. If you're convincing with information, data, and so on, be a sustainability expert for your customer. People will respond to that. Yeah, I just think it's such a, I want to say, important issue that the strategic element of implementing sustainability actually provides you with more information about your business, more understanding of where your money is being made, by whom, what customers are giving you the profit, and so on. It's an opportunity to kind of cleanse your business really from some of the customers that may not be the kind of people that are really delivering your profit. You may be being a sort of busy fool with the business. So I would say it's a massive opportunity to audit, start measuring and understanding where your money's being made. A lot of businesses during the COVID period did exactly that, and found that they were losing money on people and customers and so on. So I think it's a chance to reorientate and start something new and future-proof. Simple as that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Just conscious of time, I want to make sure we get to this next talking point. So I'm going to jump right into that, which is what role does digital finishing play in a converter's sustainability strategy? Participants were asked if they have an understanding of sustainability measures made available through digital finishing. Simon, I have a feeling you might have some thoughts on this one. So
yeah, well, obviously this question was the one question in the survey that was really the Highcon question. But I want to start by not talking about it as the Highcon question and use it simply as an analogy. One of the things to understand is that sustainability isn't just about sustainable products, it's about sustainability in processes and operations. And I'd like to refer to digital finishing just as, or finishing altogether, as one operation that happens in the converter. There's printing, there's folding gluing, there's the materials you source. There's, I saw there was a question in the Q&A about mixed materials in packaging versus mono materials and so on. There's a whole series of things, but actually processes matter. It's not just the product. Nobody looking at a package knows how it was made. They may understand what materials are there, and they don't like plastic, but they do like cardboard. Lots of surveys say that, but they have no idea whether it was done in a green way or a dirty way, whether it was done in an energy intensive way or an energy light manner. And therefore, all businesses need to look in the mirror and ask whether their internal processes and production decisions are really optimal from a sustainability perspective. And within that context, looking at finishing is one of the areas. I could look at this and say, hey, this is great. We've got actually 71% of respondents said they fully understand the benefits and know the principle, but would like to know more. While 24% were honest and said, I don't understand, which is fine. I actually doubt that as many people really get it as think they do, because we're a young company, it's emerging technology, but at least there's a hunger, which I see as being positive. As I say, beyond the pitch for my solution, which I believe is very sustainable and on certain jobs is much more carbon sparing than analog die cutting, is actually the point about looking at processes. Processes really matter. The amount of power you use, the way in which you operate, how you make your production decisions makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just the bit they don't see. It's too much just about, does it pass the customer test? But what about looking in the mirror at the end of the day and saying, have I done my piece?
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, it does come back to that issue of looking at processes, and I think digital finishing and other technology. Perhaps that the survey may be suggested in a couple of places that people aren't fully aware of technology options that are available on the sustainability side. Marcus?
Yeah, I like that. Well, I think again, that's communication, and where do people find their information? And during COVID, obviously, we were attending virtual events and looking online and having lots of calls like this. But people seem to be synchronizing back to going to trade shows. But actually, let's be honest, all these events and ways to purchase and that just don't treat sustainability front and center. And I think it will take more research and more time spent to really get the right technology for your business. I think sometimes we get into a little bit of buying frenzy at shows and things and buy what we think is the right thing. I think we need to, spend a couple of days in Geneva in the middle of the summer and kind of really think about it. But no, in all seriousness, it's partly why we did launch the event, really, is that sustainability isn't given. In 5-10 years' time, the word sustainability will become normalized. I think it's not, it won't be, oh, let's talk about it. It will just be the way we do business. But, if you're choosing technology, sustainability's got to be front and center in terms of the choices you make. And that's whether it provides, obviously with Highcon, Highcon technology radically increases productivity and enables particularly the world as it's going shorter and shorter and shorter run. Fantastic. And that enables you to be more efficient and use less energy and run more jobs and so on. But, the fact that, like Simon was saying, I doubt that people really understand. And that happens with new technology. But, Highcon do a lot to communicate. All of our brands do out there. But to what extent do we forensically investigate each one and to make a considered decision? I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's time to come on to the final point, which is an interesting one. Are sustainability actions and words aligned? Simon, I'm going to go to you on this. I think a lot of businesses perhaps responded that they expect to be making sustainability driven decisions in 5 years' time. Kind of encouraging, but also, looking at perhaps responses elsewhere, whether people's commitments, people's words are aligned with what they're doing. Are people doing enough to get to that point if they do want to be making sustainability driven decisions in 5 years' time? And it also ties in with people that have made these commitments, even the huge, global brands that have made 2030, 2050 commitments. A lot of them are not currently on track with what they're doing, to meet those targets. So there does seem to be a disconnect, both from looking at this survey and more generally, that people aren't doing enough to meet the goals that they're making.
Absolutely, Carissa. If we just asked this question, we could take this the answers being hugely encouraging. The largest number, 53% said sustainable. They expect in 5 years their business will be making sustainability-driven business decisions. Sounds great, but it's inconsistent with pretty much everything else we've seen until now. If you don't know what you're measuring, you don't know how to do so, how can you expect to make sustainability-driven decisions 5 years from now? Reaching net zero and carbon neutral, that's great, 22%. But honestly, there's not a business on the face of this earth, certainly not a production business that's using materials and chemistry and so on, that can say that they can say that in 5 years they're going to be at net zero. It's just not there. So to me, it's very clear that people do have good intentions, but the road to hell is paved with them unless they do the right things. And when they say the biggest single challenge to sustainable print productivity at the moment is customer demand for low prices, and that's 31%, then I look at that and I say, there is a real mismatch between actions and whatever. And therefore, it's a call to action, it's a wake-up call. There's a lack of understanding, knowledge, and clarity. There's a lot that needs to be done, but I take it positively. If we don't say this critically, I say it's an opportunity, and the industry needs to step up to the plate, every one of us, and we need to help one another, but everyone needs to have a sustainability champion in their company who needs to learn and needs to have the ear of the decision makers to help start driving change.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcus, we do have a couple of questions. I'm hoping that we might have time. Marcus, can you weigh in on the alignment of words and actions when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, well, I think like we said along, there's kind of contradictions there. And like at the very beginning, I'm not a sustainability expert. Yeah. And what we're trying to do here is interpret information via this survey to provoke thinking. Not overly judging the print industry, and let's be honest, can we look at any industry that's really doing enough for the environment? And the answer is probably no, apart from the renewable energy. I mean, on that note, you know, the people that invested in solar on their factories, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, are reaping the rewards now, aren't they? They made the investment. I bet the investment was really difficult to justify, and so on and so forth. But now they've managed to protect their businesses, and I think the same thing goes for other aspects here. The cost of doing so, and the cost of demand for low prices. Maybe you've got the wrong customers. You know, what are you doing to find the ones that value that? There are people out there. There's a growing number of them. Easier said than done, and easier for me to say it, but you know, we all have customers that we don't make money from because we do business with them. They demand a lot and don't pay us enough. Is it time to cull? I'm trying to be provocative now, Simon. Yeah, so I mean, it's a confusing, difficult, challenging time anyway in the world, isn't it? And I think by taking back a bit of control and mindset change, unlearning what we used to learn before, or used to think was the right way of doing things, unlearning and start focusing on implementing a sustainability strategy.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, we are running out of time. We do have some questions that we're not going to have a chance to get to all of them. I think one of them, someone asked, is it possible to get a copy of the survey results? And we will email everyone the survey that's registered for the webinar. Simon, you touched on the question about user recycling there. We also have one asking, should we have a carbon footprint of manufacturer label icon on every product? A quick weigh in from both of you on that one. Okay, it doesn't sound like we do.
To me, it's very difficult because you need to be able to understand the results. There's so much labeling of products that actually cause confusion and misunderstanding. One day you might get there. It's not going to be a short-term thing. Something that has more carbon isn't necessarily bad. You need to understand processes. It's a great question, a complex topic. I don't know.
Perfect.
I can see in the future there being a bit like you've got the nutrients on a packet of food now, and you know, I could see eventually that happening where you have a carbon impact. There probably is already examples of that. So I think that would be something that consumers would value.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was a temporary thing, but during COVID, there was a growth in localized buying and selling and stuff. So obviously we've talked very much about the business side, but there's there are other sides to sustainability that are important in terms of well-being and responsibility, to social responsibility as well. So eventually I can see that being a thing that will help consumers purchase the right thing. And I think eventually as well, packaging will change and so on, and it will cease to become a systemic problem, because actually there is a systemic problem with all of the industries or traditional industries like this, because it's not designed, they're not originally designed. It's mass production for mass consumption. By its very nature, it's wasteful. But we're in a sweet spot as an industry with technology that's new, that's meeting and able to do things specifically for people, what they need, and so on. So we as an industry have got a big opportunity there to be a leader in sustainability.
I think another thing, there are a couple of questions that we're not going to have time for. There is an EcoPrint LinkedIn page. I'd love to maybe keep a discussion going. Please do put questions in there or comments, and we can kind of keep that dialogue going, which is really important. And what we want to do with EcoPrint is have that community and have that conversation as well as the Geneva event. And the website again is ecoprint.events. I believe the Highcon website is highcon.net to find out more about Highcon. Thank you so much to everybody that came to the webinar, and like you said, we'll send you a copy of the survey, and it's also been recorded as well. So thank you so much, Marcus, and thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you everyone for attending.